there, and welcome back to The Marketing Hustle. If you're new here, I'm your host, Lottie, and I am obsessed with startup brands and how they grow. I'm the founder of two businesses, Upworld, which is a community for all people in marketing, and Brand Hackers, where we run fractional marketing teams for brands with big dreams. Today, I had a cup of tea with Matthew Herbert, who is founder of Tracksuit. Tracksuit make beautifully affordable brand tracking, and we had an amazing conversation where I learned so much about the importance of top of funnel marketing and how in a world with Meta we've all lost the art of brand building. We did quite a lot of simplifying some of the stuff that you will have read about in textbooks and putting that into human language. We talked about the power of communication and why that really matters within businesses to get access to money, and we talked about how more brands can afford brand tracking than you might realise. Before we dive in, please do follow us where you're listening to this podcast and leave a rating and review after, because it makes such a difference for us to spread the word and get more amazing founders and guests involved. My DMs are always open on LinkedIn if there's someone you'd love to hear from. Can't wait to hear what you think of the episode. Let's go back to the beginning. Why this life pursuit? Why are you dedicating your life to brand tracking?
Yeah. I think maybe talking about what Tracksuit is, and then we can get into a bit of the history of that. So just quickly, Tracksuit, beautiful, affordable, always on brand tracking. Essentially, we send out thousands of surveys every week, asking consumer brands, their consumers, how well are they known, what are they known for, how does that compare to their competitor sets, and how does that change over time. So it's all about how do you iterate a strategy, inform your strategy, measure the impact of what you're doing, and then iterate ongoing. And it's all around this common language of helping marketers communicate with founders and non-marketing stakeholders. How do we grow incredible consumer businesses off the back of great brands? And so that's a little bit about Tracksuit and the life pursuit of getting into the world of brand tracking.
Why are you solving this problem?
It's a question that I even ask anybody in market research. Is how do you get into the world of market research? You don't have your careers advisors at school. Market research is not necessarily as a career option, but I'm so pleased that we've landed in it. It's great.
Did you literally just land in it?
Landed in it. No, so my background, I studied law and science back in New Zealand. And as I was finishing my studies, I had the opportunity to join Uber as Uber was setting up across Australia and New Zealand. And that was my first exposure to big tech business, but operating like a startup in a new market. Really well known in North America and over in Europe, but no one knew what Uber was, what was coming. And so that was the job to be done, is how do we take Uber, how do we transition and transform the transportation industry, setting up the teams, getting cars on the road, getting people using the apps. And so being part of that was incredible. Did that for a number of years. And then I moved over to Australia with a Snapchat management company. So we were helping brands and agencies like McDonald's and Pepsi and Coca-Cola use Snapchat as a new channel to connect with younger audiences. And that was kind of MarTech startup. I ended up looking after business development across Australia and New Zealand for that company. That's where I met my co-founder Connor, who was in a operations role in New York as we were taking on North America. And then we both ended up back in New Zealand. So I'd been working in MarTech startups, brand adjacent roles, and then across that time, as Connor and I were back in New Zealand, there was this hypothesis that we're working on around the rapid growth of consumer brands over the last 10 to 15 years, but reaching these plateaus. Why was the case? Why were modern consumer brands not kicking on to become the Unilevers, the Procter & Gamble's, the Colgates? And the hypothesis was there was such a focus on bottom of funnel conversion marketing, focusing on sales, impressions, the conversions, the here and now, at the expense of longer term brand building, reaching that plateau. And how do we bust through that plateau? It's old school brand marketing, focusing on future demand as well as existing demand. And around that was what gets measured gets managed. And consumer brands, we've been so focused on measuring the bottom of the funnel and optimizing for that, putting £1 in and getting £2, £3 back 5 years ago, and it becoming less efficient, less effective. And so how do we how do we give that visibility on the longer term play, on the brand building play, and that's where the world of old school market research and brand tracking came in and said, if that's what the biggest businesses in the world have been doing for the last 40, 50 years, how do we make brand tracking accessible, affordable, and easy to use for modern growth consumer brands? And that's how I ended up in the world of brand tracking.
So brand tracking is as old as time, but the plateau problem is new because Meta kind of made it. Is that your hypothesis?
Yeah, I think going back to the what gets measured gets managed. It's been relatively easy. Actually, I'll go back to that kind of the three eras of marketing.
Yeah.
And speaking to, as you said, back in time when consumer brands and advertising were happening, back in the 60s, back in the 70s, big emotional brand campaigns with no measurement. It was out of home, it was big billboards, it was big emotional campaigns with Coca-Cola's or the Marlboro Man and the likes of that, which then moved into this era too when web and iOS and digital marketing became a thing, and it became all of a sudden it became a lot easier to communicate with finance teams about the return on investment of marketing spend and ad dollars. With Meta, with Google, we could say, we're putting £1 in and we're getting £3 back, and how great is that? And so it became optimizing the slot machine and building that confidence and investment from CFOs and accounting teams and finance teams to say, we know where our money's going, we can articulate what the return on that is. And it made marketing into pounds and pennies and numbers which non-marketing stakeholders can get their head around. And then we move into this era 3 where changes to cookies and iOS and privacy changes, and tracking and attribution becomes a lot harder, and performance marketing and cost of acquisition becomes less effective or efficient. And so there was this need now in this new era to say, do that and do that really well and optimize the bottom. But how do we start to move more into that old school emotional brand building play, but also needing to articulate what the return is, where should we spend our money, how do we be effective with it, how do we make the case for the investment in the right areas?
Yeah.
And so that's where we're here now.
Does everyone get why it matters?
Why what matters?
Why? So you've just told that story as though we're now in this world where optimization is much harder, and therefore we all kind of self-evidently need to be tracking brand. That's not the conversation I have with lots of CMOs, and definitely not the conversation I have with lots of founders. And your story is really compelling, and it's kind of like, well, yeah, of course. But I don't think that's the reality. How do people you chat to feel about this stuff?
Yeah, well, I think it's talking to founders and scaling modern brands about what has been the trajectory of and return of marketing dollars over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Is it continuing to get more efficient? Is it continuing to get more
What
effective?
do they say when you ask them that question? It's like, your whole marketing spend, what's it done?
Yeah.
Do they have a way of answering it?
Yeah, it's saying it's harder to. It's being less efficient to reach the right groups, and we're starting to cap out, and we're starting to reach these ceilings. And so the case now is, how do we make the case for investment in other channels? How do we make the case for investment in the portion of budget that we can't directly attribute? And that's where getting that confidence and being able to prove that, stakeholders, finance teams, founders are rightly saying, well, where should we spend it? How do we prove it?
Yeah.
How do we articulate what we need to do?
Yeah.
And that's really what we want to champion and support, is that language, is that confidence and investment. And here's how we're informing our strategy.
Yeah.
This is how we're measuring the portion of budget that we've typically never been able to measure.
Yeah.
And this is how we're going to iterate continually.
Tracksuit data gets used to unlock spend to drive top of the funnel awareness. Is that its most common use case?
Yeah, absolutely. It's saying, what are we doing with the portion of budget that's not going onto digital channels? So it might be out of home, it might be billboards, it might be investing in TV for the first time. It's those traditional channels which we know we need to spend on because that's where new audiences are coming from, but we can't measure it, or it's a lot harder to measure. And so that's where we're building Tracksuit, is that visibility into the top of funnel marketing to complement attribution and measurement further down. So
Tracksuit data, I really want anyone hearing this to like get what it does. So Tracksuit data will show me my current awareness and my current brand perception. Or what language would in your words, how would you explain it?
Yeah, so we took old school brand tracking, and we've broken it down to the fundamentals of brands and what brand needs to do to build business. Starting with how big is the total addressable market?
Yeah,
I think understanding what the market size is that you as a consumer brand is playing in. I know we've over the last couple of years we've gone through our own raising of investment, and TAM and total addressable market is one of those metrics that everybody asks for, and it's really hard to prove out. And so that's one of the key metrics is that we start by understanding is how big is your market? How many potential consumers are out there?
And that's people who have an attitudinal view that means they might buy into that category, or is that the size of the existing category? Like, what's your definition of addressable market?
Yeah, we look at those who are active in your category. So in coffee, Grind's one of our customers over here. Every week we're going out to a nationally representative of the population of the UK, and we're saying, have you purchased coffee in the last 3 months?
Okay.
Or month. However,
so you start at the very biggest level.
So those who are active in your category, and then those who may be active in the near future. So kind of considering buying or coming in. So it's
if you take a category like kombucha that's got lower penetration but higher growth, you'd be asking how many people buy kombucha, small, how many people are considering buying kombucha and proving that that's growing?
Yeah, so we'd look at kombucha, we'd look at healthy beverages, we'd define the category so that we're always talking to your relevant potential customers.
Okay.
And then we move into, as you said, awareness and consideration. Awareness, how well is your brand known? Really important metric, because it's hard to sell to someone that's never heard of you.
Yeah, it's wild that it's not like that you have to even argue that it's an important metric.
Yeah, well, I think, and that's where as we're working with modern consumer brands, taking on established categories. You know, if you're coming into the cereal category, if you're a new coffee company coming into the coffee category, or a new kombucha coming into the beverage, into the soft drinks market, those bigger incumbent brands have been spending millions and billions of pounds over the last 50 years. So there's a real job to be done to just even be known. And so how well are you known? And then we start to move down as, okay, who considers our brand? Who's considering our competitor brands? And then we're able to move into, well, why are people considering a competitor brand and not us? Or why are we driving preference? Why are we the most preferred brand in the category? Or why are we not the most preferred brand in the category? And starting to look at those key pieces around total addressable market, how well are you known, awareness, consideration, preference, usage, and then into attributes. What do consumers think and feel about your brand? So starting to look at how do you move people across, what type of communications do you need to go out to, where should you be spending your marketing dollars, and how do you build the brand to take on those incumbents and take that market share?
When should a brand start thinking about this stuff?
And even talking about a brand or a consumer business has a brand around it, and brand has been shown, brand has been shown time and time again to make it more effective to acquire customers, to be able to drive more premium value with your price points, to protect yourself as a protective moat against competition or market downturns. And so brand has always been really important, but brand has done a poor job of branding or marketing itself over the years.
So lazy, but
And so I think right from the start, it is so important, as well as getting your product needs to be right, the market needs to be right, your business metrics need to be right, and brand as a player in driving great consumer business. And so thinking about it right from the start needs to be super important.
And thinking about it with thinking about it for sure, at what point do you think you need to start measuring it? And at what point is Tracksuit the solution to start measuring it?
Yeah, I think it pays to measure. I mean, businesses are tracking business metrics all the time. When it comes to brand and brand tracking specifically, if you look at recommended spending anywhere between kind of 1% and 5% of your annualized marketing budget on market research, 1% on brand tracking, well then if you're spending, £1 million a year, it probably pays to spend 10 to 20,000 pounds a year to track what that investment is doing.
Yeah.
That's probably.
So if you're spending about $1 million, you need to be talking to you or someone else. And if you're spending less than that, do you have any advice for brands who know that? I think there's a gulf, and you're closing that gulf for sure. And that's why it's so exciting that you're like here in the UK, and it's no longer a conversation about being really huge, but there's still a gap from I've just launched into Whole Foods and I'm a way off spending 1 million on brand tracking. What advice do you have for businesses in that space?
Yeah, well, I think getting distribution in retail is fantastic. That's a great.
But is there a way?
Great start.
How can they start measuring this top of the funnel stuff?
We can start measuring that right from the start. Right from the start. There's a brand in a New Zealand brand I'll talk to about brand in New Zealand, Boring Oat Milk, who's been playing in the alternative milk category. As Boring Oat Milk, a couple of years ago, as Boring Oat Milk launched into market, we started tracking because we were tracking the alternative milk category. At the same time, Oatly was doing their first large out-of-home campaigns across New Zealand with billboards everywhere.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to see two different players of a local brand and a large international brand coming to market at the same time. Oatly, what we could see, took market share quickly and established a baseline that was in kind of the top three. At the same time, tracking this new challenger brand coming through, Boring, we can see over the last 2.5 years, their brand is now the third most commonly, or the third highest awareness in the category, overtaking Oatly, overtaking the competitor average, overtaking large incumbent house of brands. And being able to tell that story from we had no awareness to we now have 10% awareness in this category in market, and then being able to take your team, your investors, your agencies on that journey of we started at zero, and this is how well we've grown the brand. This is how well we've grown the category. This is where we've got to. So it pays to start tracking your brand. It's really
inspiring.
Telling the story right from the start around starting at zero, building awareness, showing the type of consumer that you're resonating with. One of the biggest plays that we see using Tracksuit, especially for CPG brands, is taking brand tracking data into conversations with retailers.
Yes.
And this starts to move. This is not just a marketing tool. This is a tool for marketers and founders and their sales teams.
And category growth.
And category growth, to be able to go into conversations with retailers to say, this is the traction that our brand is on. This is how well we're known. This is the type of consumer that we're resonating with. This is who we're going to be bringing into store for you. And this is the argument for distribution and shelf space. Because you've also got the visibility on the wider category and your competitor set as well. I mean, a great example and something we love to see is Misfits protein bars, who are a great UK London-based brand who we get to work with, and their Tesco distribution recently that's come off, and the expansion of that has been incredible. And they're a company that has got a great product, have got the business fundamentals, and have been thinking about brand right from the start.
And they've been taking brand data into those conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's brought to you by Tracksuit, the beautiful, affordable and always-on brand tracking dashboard that helps marketers answer the infamous question, is what we're doing working? The Tracksuit team have become great friends this year, and they've now expanded into the UK. You can expect to hear a lot more of them through the team at Upwild, and I'm sure through the industry grapevine. Built by marketers for marketers, Tracksuit makes brand tracking affordable, accessible, and easy to understand for everyone, from CMOs to CFOs, brand specialists to founders. They survey thousands of people each week from panels of millions around the world to give you full visibility on your brand's health in 30 days with insights updated every day. Tracksuit is fast becoming the common language for marketers and agencies to measure, understand, and communicate the value of brand building. So check it out at gotracksuit.com or get in touch with me if you've got any questions and I can hook you up with the legends in charge.
Okay, so dream state is that a business, before it does anything, starts brand tracking.
Yeah, it's interesting. As we set up Tracksuit, the beauty of doing what we're doing is we're building our own brand and company at the same time. And so we're literally in the same shoes as founders and brands out there. We're a B2B market research MarTech company, but we want to show up and behave like a consumer brand.
This is a side tangent we need to be brief on, but I'm fascinated. How are you tracking your own brand awareness?
We're tracking our consumer brands. We're talking to marketers every single week, asking about the brand tracking space, asking them tools and
in
providers.
like standardized survey formats or anecdotally?
Standardized survey formats.
Oh, that's
as well as
so
anecdotally,
exciting.
absolutely.
As in, like, we're all having the conversations anecdotally, and we're
Yeah.
all like, I definitely remember the feeling when the conversation moved from like, you founded what?
Yeah.
to like someone having heard of what I did and how much of a shift that went. But I have no hard data.
Totally. And so being able to see that. We're a B2B company. We don't service B2B, so we're doing some tracking outside of our remit. But all for us, but we're tracking our brand. I think we're tracking our brand. We're looking at that as something that we want to walk the walk of what we're doing and show up like a consumer brand, like our customers, and take a lot of advice and inspiration from what we're doing. But I think there's another great kind of anecdotal piece that I heard is from a large confectionery brand that we work with across Australia and New Zealand, who said 3 years ago when we started working with Tracksuit, just as we were founded, taking brand tracking data into their category conversations with their supermarkets, and the retailers saying, what on earth is this data? What on earth is Tracksuit? What on earth is this data? But great, we can see your brands, we can see the type of consumers you bring in, we can see where you fit with competitors. As a category buyer, it makes our decision a lot easier about who we should stock and who we should have on shelf. Fantastic. And so that was what on earth is Tracksuit 3 years ago, to now the same head of marketing earlier in the year said to me, it's expected that Tracksuit data is now being used when you're having your category buying and retailer conversations.
That's huge.
Because it, as well as sales data and scan data and shopper data, looking at brands, looking at the top of funnel, is that missing piece that puts. And if you're a brand or a founder in that situation, to be able to walk into the category buyers and say, this is how mature we are with thinking about our brands. Yeah. This is how mature we are about thinking about the category. This is where we're showing the investments. This is where we're showing how we're going to help you win with people coming into your supermarkets or into your stores. And this is why you need us on shelf. It's just showing younger and younger brands a maturity in the way that they're approaching their marketing and their brand building. So that's been
If you fast forward to a world where that's the same in the UK, and I love that vision that it's like where's your Tracksuit data? This is really embarrassing for you that you haven't got that. What is the implication of that going to be? Is that going to unlock a load more investment in consumer brand? Feels like there's quite a meaningful shift in the way we think about media, the way we think about marketing team structure, because suddenly this stuff's going to need to be resourced. At the moment, we've got this quite performance-heavy industry where the brand roles have become brand commercial roles, and actually, like the art of brand is, I think, not that prominent in smaller businesses. Do you think all of this is going to change?
I think there's a need for it to change, but it's not. But it's also not a do one or the other. It's not say performance isn't working and you need to do
but
brand.
There might be a right sizing.
It's about doing both, and it's about doing brand building as well as sales at the same time. The way we think about marketing and the way we communicate is this concept of future demand and existing demands.
Yeah.
And it's similar to the big brands and the long and short of it, Peter Field, Les Binet. Byron Sharp, James Herman,
There's no shortage
or
of books.
Mark Ritson. You know, it's all this marketing effectiveness, but what we're looking at is how do we make all the theory of marketing science and effectiveness relevant to consumer brands at different stages of their life cycle. And so the way we look at this is the concept of future demand and existing demand. Existing demands being the 5% of people that are ready to buy from you here and now.
Yeah.
And that's the job of optimizing bottom of funnel marketing and capturing everybody that's ready to buy from you. And performance marketing does a great job of that. Discounts and promotions and showing up with the nice targeted audiences. At the same time, there's 95% of your category who's not ready to buy from you, but they will be coming into the category in the near future.
Yeah.
And so from a marketing standpoint, how well are you building future demands? How well are you building demands for your products, for your brands in the future? And that's around emotional positioning in terms of making your brand more familiar with those consumers so that when they are ready to buy, the purchase intent goes up, showing that consumers have a higher purchase intent for brands that they feel familiar with. So how are we doing both jobs? Harvest existing demands, build the future demands, and do both. And that's, I think, the shift that we're starting to see now with consumer brands, the structure of marketing teams, the conversations with CFOs.
Beginning.
And we have an interesting blog post on our website, which is all around how to use brand to raise capital investment. And that's been input by leading VCs from around the world who are now also looking at not only doing their legal due diligence, doing their commercial due diligence, but also starting to put value on what are you doing with your brands, where do you sit with your competitor sets, who's the type of customer that you have right now, who's your future customer, what trajectory are you on. So being able to, as a founder, as an exec, as a marketer, have those conversations with investors who are starting to look at what's the role of brand playing now. Absolutely a shift.
And it has to come back to more cash. Because as you say, it's both. You can't, like, there's a correction period and it's an expensive one as you maintain your bottom of the funnel spend to keep revenue where you need it to be and invest for future demand, which has a lag inherently. I always go off like an 18-month, you start spending now, in 18 months you'll see it start to convert. How's that going to work in a time when no one's investing in consumer brands?
I think people are investing in consumer brands, but also there is a need to, again, have great business metrics, have a great product, be taking on a right category, be building your business in the right way, and there is investment out there.
Yeah, I guess it's an
sure.
argument for like backing a few horses and an awareness that backing a business to grow past that plateau requires some significant spend. And yeah, this comes back to the same thing. Like you've got to have your house in order to build that business case. Totally.
And I think if we look, there's kind of three graphs which can help. And I'll send in the show notes afterwards around the book that my co-founder wrote, James Herman, on future demand, why brand building is important for startups and scaling businesses. But if we only focus on bottom of the funnel and existing demand, at some point we have reached everybody that's here to buy from us, and there's no more people to sell to.
Yeah.
And then we need to go into this brand building play of bringing more people into the funnel. But if we do both at the same time, as we're selling to those who are here right now and capturing or harvesting that existing demand at the same time as continually bringing more people into to potentially buy from us, then we have long-term sustainable business growth. I think that's the real job to be done and to focus on.
Are there brands that you're really excited about? Who do you think's nailing it?
There are a number of brands. If I look at some of our customers that we're working with here in the UK, Fertility, in the hormone space, they invested in their first out-of-home billboard campaign at the end of last year. To make the case of that with founders, to get buy-in with the different stakeholders around we are going to invest in out-of-home advertising for the first time, building that confidence in this is where we're at. We know we need to do this. This is how we're going to do this effectively and efficiently. And the results they've seen off the back of that with their awareness growth specifically has been amazing, and an amazing confidence booster. And it was thought out, it was measured correctly, and the results came through. And now being in a position to iterate.
Do you
again.
have a view on how awareness correlates to how does awareness correlate to sales? Is that the right question to be asking? Is that an irrelevant question? I'm sure you get. It's the challenge that any CMO is going to have presenting awareness data. I think that's the holy grail of how do you connect awareness to sales. I don't know that there's a perfect way of doing that right now, but what you can do and what you can do with Tracksuit more specifically is be able to measure that always on awareness growth, and to be able to overlay and correlate and causate different data sets as well. So with Tracksuit, where we want to be the common language, the way that consumer brands measure top of funnel awareness and perceptions, and to be able to overlay that with sales data, with revenue data, with channel spend, with all sorts of other data sets to understand or correlate or causate what is the shift. I also think it's incredibly hard from a marketing and probably the wrong question to be asking from a marketing perspective around this £1 was to drive awareness, when we know that marketing does more than just make someone aware of your brand, or just make someone buy from you. And it's not to say that traditional channels like TV or billboards are only brand building. Yeah.
And it's not to say that Meta and TikTok and Google are only sales content. And so kind of a shift in mindset of tracking it to start with, overlaying the right data sources, keeping it as simple as possible, but knowing and communicating and getting that buy-in that we're building that future demand, and we can prove that out by saying, another 1 million people now consider our brand over the last 2 months because of the work that we've done.
And would it be a false narrative to say that by doubling the number of people we've considered, like you could say this many people used to consider our brand and this was our revenue, we have increased that by X 100,000, and therefore we would expect to see an impact on bottom line over time? Like what I'm getting at is there's such an interesting tension in, yes, we need more tracking, both of awareness and top of the funnel, because we become so obsessed with tracking bottom of the funnel, and you need to track everything to build a business case for anything. And yet there's this thing at the heart of brand building, which is that this stuff is art as well as science, and getting, as you say, getting someone to do anything is a mystical, you can't track, you can't say this pound did this one job in someone's head. But I think everyone listening to this is like stuck in these rooms, whether that's with investors or with their team, or with their direct reports, where they're like, I need to have a narrative for everything. And I think you use the word communication, which feels like the nub of this all. It's about data, but also about stories and about simple language. Like, how do you untangle that mess? So I've just like thrown a big, there's a problem, fix it.
Yeah, and absolutely. And this is where we talk about our, back to the point about the common language. That is why we're building Tracksuit. That is our mission. That is our vision, is to.
And by that, you just mean everyone getting this stuff and being able to talk about it meaningfully. Yeah,
is to be that common language to measure, understand, and communicate the value of brand and marketing and what it's doing to overall incredible business growth. And so it's a common language, it's the framing, it's the understanding, where are we right now, what should we do, and then how do we iterate to continue to get better and better over time. And so that's where we're getting. I think you asked a few other parts of that question that I'm trying to get my head around.
No, that's all good.
There's the common language piece, the common language piece.
But that's what I think you can take away from this, which is, yes, as a marketeer, I'm stuck in this, like, how do I track stuff? I have to track everything, but yet there's stuff I can't track. And I think the answer to that is to focus internally on education and trying to simplify the problem. And that's how you get stakeholders on board, is by going right back to this. I need to grow awareness, I need to grow consideration, and I need to measure what I'm doing.
That's right. It's simplified, and it's a common language, and that is why what we're doing with Tracksuit and with brand tracking, we're not reinventing brand tracking, but we are making brand tracking affordable and accessible for modern brands.
Yeah.
Looking at the fundamentals to build great business, because what we saw and what we're looking to solve is that traditionally, when it comes to research, when it comes to analytics, when it comes to data, there is so much out there. How do we simplify that right down into the fundamentals of what we need to be focusing on here? And so that's why, with the pieces that we track, how big's the market? How well are we known? What are we known for? What are our competitors doing? How does that move over the time? And what should we do? To answer that is what we're doing, working.
Yeah.
And simplifying it right down to that common way. And then that gets buy-in and alignment and confidence from founders, from execs, from investors, from finance teams.
Yeah.
And the importance of brand marketing, full funnel marketing, doing it all and just doing it as best as you possibly can.
Okay, I've got two final questions. I love the word affordable. It's music to my ears. As someone who's been trying to champion the smaller brand, and like we talked earlier about leaving P&G and then going into the startup world and just seeing everything stripped away, what does that actually mean? Like, if you're listening to this, what kind of cash does someone need to be thinking about before it's worth picking up the phone?
Totally. When we talk about affordable, and we want to be cost effective, and we're also moving from being beautiful, affordable, always on to being, and building the best brand tracker and community that we have. As we found a Tracksuit, we're looking at what is broken about old school research and consultancy research, and that was that it was prohibitively expensive to even get started. Traditional tracking programs have entry prices of anywhere between kind of £60,000 and £100,000 to get an ongoing tracking program. If you don't have that, you may do a brand health dip or a wave on an ad hoc basis. You may do it once a year, and typically you're spending £5,000 to £40,000 every time you wanted to do that one piece of research. And so brands were doing that once or twice a year, spending £10,000 to £40,000 every time they needed to do that. And they were doing it, they were doing it once a year, where everything else is tracked in a business more than once a year to give that visibility, whether it's a board meeting, whether it's reports, whenever you need to report on it, you need more than a data set that's 6 months old. And so that's what we wanted to flip with what we're doing with Tracksuit, is to say, do it all the time. So it's always on brand tracking. So you have the here and now of your brand and your competitor set, as well as all the historical trends. It's easy to use. It's beautiful. It's made for the modern marketer, and it's cost effective. It costs the same or a similar amount as what a typical brand health report would be, but it's always on. It's more intuitive. It's easy to use, and you get it all year round instead of having to pay for it every time you do it.
So if a brand has either done the ad hoc dip or is thinking about it, that's the old world, they need to be talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll be paying about the same as what they did once a year, but they get it all the time, and that's what we're building for, is for the modern marketer to keep affordable, to keep cost effective, but at the same time be the best and most appropriate way of brand tracking.
And what is one thing that someone listening to this can help you with?
Yeah, as we come into the UK, I think we want to be so much more than a brand tracking tool. We want to do the fundamentals of building the business right, building the best brand tracking in the world, but also building a community that champions brand builders. So anybody listening, if you're a founder, an investor, a marketer, we want to be speaking to you to understand what you're doing, what you're finding challenging, getting your feedback, getting your insights, and supporting and championing the brand world to help us develop and continue to build Tracksuit into the best brand tracker in the world.
Yeah, and to help you solve this like bigger problem. Like, you're making great brands that aren't going to hit a plateau, and Tracksuit will help them do that. But that feedback is going to mean that, like, as a generation of marketers, we can do something quite cool.
Absolutely. I think we look at this and saying those brands that are using Tracksuit are growing better, more sustainably growing businesses than those that aren't using Tracksuit. And fundamentally, that's a key KPI and how we measure success of what we're building. Are you growing your business better than someone that's not working with us?
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Loads.
And thanks for having us part of the part of the community and on the podcast and the wider community the last little while.
You guys are like part of the furniture now.
This is the next market, the UK, the US.
Yeah.
So we're coming in.
All to play for.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for listening. A reminder that it does make all the difference if you give us your feedback. So please do leave ratings and reviews, or drop me a message with who you'd like to hear from next. Hit that follow button and you'll be the first to hear of new episodes with more founders you wish you worked for.